Israel had continued its bombardment of Gaza while Hamas debated the latest ceasefire proposal. Hamas says it's consulting other groups about the proposed truce. Its demands include the withdrawal of Israeli troops from parts of the Strip and the guarantee Israeli airstrikes will not resume. Correspondents say that after 21 months of war in Gaza, there's political pressure and significant public support in Israel for a new lasting ceasefire. Well, joining me now to discuss top stories around the world today is Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. He joins via telephone from London. We begin with Kremlin and move to the newly proposed deal in the Gaza, talks. Now, going to Russia and the Kremlin, I'm sure you are up to date with what's going on. Is the Kremlin sending a message with the timing of the overnight bombing of Ukraine? Is this some sort of a summer offensive?
Well, I don't think it's actually a message so much as simply showing that Russia has the strength and the resources to carry on the war for a very long time. Secondly, what he's doing is simply, having refused a ceasefire, he's carrying on bombing until some sort of treaty, and the Russians want a full treaty and not just a temporary ceasefire, can be signed, and he's taking advantage of this. Moreover, there are some North Korean troops, more of them coming, and so therefore his hand has been strengthened. So the message is Russia fights on.
Now, amidst all that's happening, the Pentagon had said earlier that it would hold some of its weapons shipment to Ukraine. We know the U.S. has been the single biggest donor to Ukraine since the war began 3 years ago. So how does that embolden Putin when he hears something like that?
It is very important, not only because of the size of the amount of aid, that is, that the Ukraine is receiving, but the quality. American military hardware is in a different league to anything that, for example, Europe can offer. And therefore, yes, it emboldens President Putin. The implication there is the Ukraine is being left by herself. And when that happened, even briefly, they switched off, if you like, the Starlink and so on. That's when Russia recovered the whole of the Kursk incursion area. And so therefore, if President Trump does pull out of Ukraine, and the signals are mixed, by the way, on the one hand, he's annoyed by President Putin and also is thinking, has discussed with President Zelensky, may well contribute more hardware. On the other hand, he does have financial pressures because of his tax-cutting budget. And supplying Ukraine is yet one more cost for him. However, the point about it is that President Putin is emboldened and can see that he can push through.
Now, Ukraine also says Russia fired over 530 drones overnight against targets in Ukraine, and that's a record since this war began. Now, how much would this, halted weapons shipment from the United States impact Ukraine's air defense systems, if that is to happen?
Yes, it's not just that, but also the link to the satellite information, which is crucial to Ukraine. Without those, I'm afraid the Russian attacks will be so much more severe in their effects because the Ukrainians will be incapable of firing in these missiles and drones and bringing them down. And therefore, this is very serious for Ukraine, hence the phone call to President Donald Trump by President Zelensky.
Now, this is one of the questions, that have been thrown out there carelessly, but I would like to put that forward to you. Do you think it will be easy for Putin to take over Ukraine?
Easy, no, but he's quite clearly shown the ambition to do so. And therefore, just as Ukraine wants to see Russia off its soil, go back to 2014 boundaries, so President Putin has recently signaled that as far as he's concerned, the whole of Ukraine should go back into the fold of the Russian Empire, where it was under the Tsars and under the communists. Easy, no, but he unquestionably has this as a target.
Now, with this recent bombing of Ukraine, do you think Trump will continue the shipment of weapons or Ukraine's defense, then?
A mixed signal from Trump on this respect. On the one hand, he wants out. He's got his own cost cutting. He's got other threats in his hands like China. He's not interested. On the other one, President Putin is simply showing that he's not quite thumbing his nose, but is certainly carrying on attacking and fighting. And therefore, he's shown President Donald Trump that unless President Donald Trump can force the Ukrainians to come to heel and meet Russian demands, President Putin, the Russians will fight on.
But another important, conversation we've always had is what the U.S. can do to ensure that Ukraine stops what it is doing. Is there any way out of that?
Yes, well, USA has enormous influence in this, and Donald Trump can do an awful lot. He, in effect, could do more to curb Ukrainian demands, but he obviously, like many other people, doesn't feel that he ought to, and he's rather hoping that Russia and Ukraine will meet together and make an agreement, which is, I would say, virtually 0% chance, because they have diametrically opposite tactics and opposite aims. Please note, as you said in your run-up before I came on, that Russia has done a very significant, minor but significant move. It has recognized the Taliban, which the implication is that Russia's links with Muslim countries may strengthen, as they did during the Cold War. So all this means that President Donald Trump may well find himself dragged back into the Russian-Ukrainian war if Russia gets any stronger.
Now, you have mentioned, the use of force, if the U.S. has that much influence. We'll see how that play out. But in all of this, we haven't heard a word from Europe, being that this particular attack overnight has been the largest so far since the war began 3 years ago. Europe has finally considered to the fact that it doesn't play any role in all of this that's happening between the Kremlin and Russia.
Yes, a very astute comment. The interesting aspect about Europe is it said nothing. And this is doubly strange because, first of all, it has said it's going to step into the breach of the Americans. And secondly, it's always supported Ukraine. And suddenly it's fallen silent, which in fact confirms for President Donald Trump, and I suppose also for the Ukrainians, that only America really counts. And in this respect, Europe has come out very weakly in this latest Ukrainian mini crisis. Not a word, no shipment of arms, no we're standing by you, nothing. It's significant. Hopefully, it's because Europe was unprepared. But the implication is, if this happens again, is that Europe actually is seeing Russia winning, not only on the missiling front, but on the land war front as well.
Now let's move to the Taliban, conversation. You brought that up. This new recognition of the Taliban means more global recognition. But walk us through the impact of this and what is behind this recognition by Russia.
Russia finds itself in a bind. On the one hand, there are Russian Jews in Israel. President Putin exaggerated somewhat, I think, about their number because, for example, when Israel was founded, it was Polish, not Russian, which was the third most popular language because the Jews came from Poland. Here, he does not want to attack Israel. On the other hand, the Muslims are historically a very important ally against America. Then again, he had some local Muslim problems in Russia. On the other hand, Muslims have a great deal of money and are unhappy about how America is handling the Gaza crisis. So the opportunity is there. And how to show it? Well, he's done that, I think, very astutely by recognizing the Taliban, which shows that he is prepared to support or at least acknowledge Muslim countries, hardline Muslim countries. And I think the implication is that he's on a charm offensive with the Muslims to see if they can draw them onto his side of the war. In many ways, the Muslim countries of Russia make a more natural pairing than with America, because none of the Muslim countries really espouse American liberal democracy to any degree. And so therefore, the opportunity is there, which Russia for over 3 years has not taken much. It has got very good support from Iran, because many of the drones come from there. And I think this is a signal. I think this is a key step showing Russia is now trying to bring in more Muslim support and ideally, I suppose, Muslim money.
Now, Dr. Marek, should we presume that Moscow has no issues or fewer problems with the Taliban's human rights record and their restrictions on women and girls? Remember, there's a lot of campaign going on around the world now. Plus, I want you to answer that alongside China welcoming this move, but hasn't followed suit.
Yeah, 2 points. First of all, three strictly. Human rights. I don't think Russia is worried remotely about human rights. Whatever the Taliban's human rights record is in other respects, Russia's fine with that. As for female rights, this is, I think, very much of a on-off situation. When America, for example, looked at Afghanistan being one of its enemies, it brought up this issue. When, on the other hand, the Afghans were friendly, it drops this issue. This is nothing more than a political pawn in a game. And to be honest, the campaigning isn't the key issue. The reason why the Taliban were not recognized by other countries is because the Americans pulled out. The Taliban won, and the Americans had problems with this, just as they did with Vietnam for many years. And this is the key reason, and for precisely that reason, amongst and including the others I mentioned earlier, Russia has recognized them. Now, actually, China, up till today, was ahead. It had exchanged ambassadors, there was some trade, but right now, Russia's ahead, having formally recognized the regime. China recognized this and must surely be thinking about the same thing. It has the same premise as Russia, by the way. There are Muslims in China, the Uyghurs and so on, but it probably is making the same calculation as Russia in that it can handle its local Muslim issues, in which case there's a very nice ally for it. If the Muslims were on the China side, it would greatly strengthen its position.
Now, let's move quickly to the Gaza ceasefire deal. Trump has announced a 60-day truce, which Israel, he says Israel has agreed to, but we have yet to have a yes from Israel affirming to that proposal.
Yeah, the 60-day ceasefire is good news, especially for the people of Gaza, who have had a very unpleasant time of it and still are having it, incidentally, until the ceasefire is actually agreed. As everybody knows, even queuing for aid has become a life and death issue for many Gazans, most unfortunately. And so therefore this is to be welcomed. But the fundamental problems still remain. Israel does not want a two-state, wants still to eliminate Hamas, and has failed to do so. Hamas, for its part, wants to be a fully recognized state and wants a permanent end to the war, which Israel, as long as Hamas is around, is unlikely to agree to. So what we're looking at is not a truce, but a ceasefire. Welcome, but by no means a solution, especially not a comprehensive solution.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, for joining us from London to discuss, the issues in Kremlin and, of course, the new proposed Gaza ceasefire deal.